The content on this channel is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing we say or do should be considered advice. No tax, legal, accounting, investment, or any other kind of advice. Anything you invest in is at your own risk. Do your own research and consult with professionals. Bang, 4:30 Thursday. It's amazing. We actually are time traveling because I'm not even here right now. This is pre-recorded because I'm not in the studio on this beautiful Thursday. Steph might be in the studio. Steph's here now. Steph, how are you, sir?
Doing well. It's my first time on camera, so I'm excited.
Wow, very excited. We're going to do some evergreen content. I think typically on the show, what I do is cover like trending topics and I give you an update overall of what the market looks like. I'm going to just take a guess. I'm going to take a stab and say that Ethereum right now is trading below $1,000 per one Ethereum. So let's see if I'm right or not by the time Thursday rolls around. But we're going to do some evergreen content. This is going to be Crypto 101. I'm going to have young Steph ask me questions he has about the crypto space because he's got a young, curious, brilliant mind, and I know everything. So we're going to do that. It's going to be Crypto 101, and some evergreen content so that we're not reporting old news to anybody. So, Steph, I told you last night, go home, think of some questions, come back, and I will impart my wisdom on you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll just make something up. So, question number one, fire away.
All right, my first question is, how do taxes work with crypto?
How do taxes work with crypto? So, of course, we put a disclaimer at the front of this show, and I am not an accountant, and I would highly advise anybody that is dabbling in the crypto space, go and talk to an accountant. Honestly, just go get an accountant, even if you're not dabbling in the crypto space, because they can save you a lot of time and stress and money. But as far as I know it, and this is what my accountant has told me, there is a simple way to do it and there is a hard way to do it. Now, the hard way to do it would be to basically give the IRS like a log of all your transactions. Now, some people, let's just say you bought Bitcoin on January 1st of, 2022, and then you sell it on January 1st or December 31st of 2022. Now that's like nobody does that. That's pretty rare, but this is like the most simplified version of it. You would then take whatever your basis is, which means your cost basis is what you bought it at. So if Bitcoin, you buy it at, let's say, $20,000, and at the end of the year, you sell it for $25,000. That's a five. So your cost basis is 20,000. You sell it for 25,000. Your profit then is $5,000. But there's going to be a capital gains tax on it. And the way capital gains tax works, and again, I'm not an accountant, but as far as I understand it is, there's short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains. Long-term capital gains is any asset that you hold for over a year. Short-term is anything you hold for under a year. So in this scenario, you would pay long-term capital gains on that 5,000 US dollars. I don't know long-term capital gains, or I'm sorry, short-term capital gains. What did I say? Did I say you would pay long-term or short-term?
Long-term.
No, you would pay short-term capital gains because it's under a year. If you waited one more day into January 1st or January 2nd, 2023, then so this actually kind of like something to consider. Again, not investment advice or accounting advice, but if you're selling anything on December 31st, maybe you should just wait, because if you just wait one more day, it's going to be reflected on your taxes the following year. So nothing is taxed until you sell. So the only thing you have to worry about when you buy is your tax implications and your basis, basically, is what it's called. So and you also want to know the difference between short and long term, because if you're, a couple months away or a couple days away from what would be long term, because you've held an asset for close to a year, then you would want to consider like just dealing with whatever price action there is for a couple more days, because you're going to get a tax break that's probably worth it. So anyway, my accountant tells me he knows enough to be dangerous. He says, basically, just give me your basis, give me all your transactions of everything you sold, and then we'll just like not zero it out, but we'll just do it, and then you'll just pay your taxes. We don't need to see all the transactions. Everything that you do is basically considered a taxable event, though, especially if you're like staking and you're claiming staking rewards. So that does get a little dicey there. Again, I'm not giving you accounting advice. I'm not an accountant. Taxes in crypto, they can get very complex, like very complex, very quickly. But I would say get yourself an accountant and talk to them would be the way to, excuse me, would be the way to do it. So uh, that's the answer to question number one here in Crypto 101. What's your next question, Steph?
All right.
Do you have any follow up questions?
Just so you would only pay taxes on the $5,000 you gain, not your initial principal you put in. So the 20,000 you put in, you
Well,
wouldn't pay taxes.
where
But then,
I mean, it depends on where that 20,000 came from, right? But like, I'm assuming that you had that 20,000 already post tax. So if you've got it in your bank account from your job or your savings, or I don't know, however, um, money is going to get taxed
yeah,
like a lot. And as an employee, which is what most people are, it's a lot more straightforward because you already have taxes paid coming out of your paycheck. But like for me, who is basically unemployable at this point in my life, I have to get an accountant every single year, and I have to defer every single year because I have no idea, like, or I have to file an extension, not defer, because I like can't figure out my shit, and it takes me 9 extra months, and it's just a huge pain in the ass. But for an employee, whenever you get a paycheck, they're already taking the taxes out ahead of time, and then so any money you have in your bank account at that point, unless you claim a bunch of dependents, which you could. I mean, I think I again, non-accountant, non-investment advice, not tax advice. Talk to an accountant, but I'm pretty sure you could claim like a bunch of dependents even if you didn't have any, and they would basically not take any taxes out of your paycheck. But then at the end of the year, when you go and file, they're going to be like, "Hey, Steph, like you don't have any kids, you're not married. I don't understand what the hell you're doing. You owe us money." So it's very possible to owe at the end of the year as opposed to when people get their tax returns. Like people, usually employees are very excited for tax season because they get a tax return. People like me, entrepreneurs, business owners, I wish tax season never came around. So yeah, usually I file an extension. But yeah, taxes in crypto, like I said, the simple answer is it's basically just your basis of what you paid for the asset, and then you subtract whatever you sell it for from that, or you subtract that from whatever you sell it for, and then you're going to get taxed based on whether you were holding it for a year or under a year for long term or short term capital gains. So, but talk to an accountant.
all right. Well, for me, question number 2 would be, can you buy crypto without using an exchange?
Can you buy crypto without using an exchange? So, I like your line of thinking here, Steph. It's like you're trying to like really stay under the radar here. You're wondering what your tax implications are. You're wondering how you can get your hands on some crypto that maybe is like, who knows where it came from. Um, so you're in the right spot. Yeah, so you can. Obviously, it's not super convenient. The number one way to do it would be to like just meet somebody who has crypto. And now this is not easy, right? Because it's so the whole point of Bitcoin is you can transact value without a third party and it's trustless. I just know if I'm sending it to somebody, I don't need to go through an intermediary, and the exchanges will facilitate that, whether it's a centralized exchange or a decentralized exchange. So, can you clarify on your question? What do you mean by buying crypto? Do you mean like from fiat to any crypto? And by exchange, do you mean like a centralized exchange like Coinbase or like any exchange out there?
Kind of how you said, any exchange out there from fiat straight to crypto.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, yeah. So the easiest way to do it, there actually used to be this website called Local Bitcoins, which was a place where you would like meet up with somebody who had crypto and face to face actually do the transaction. That can get sketchy, and that's also I'm pretty sure like was outlawed. So I don't know if Local Bitcoins is still around or if that's still a good thing to do. Um, but most of the time, like even if it's a decentralized exchange, they're going to make you do KYC, do AML, which KYC, for those of you that don't know, because this is Crypto 101, KYC is know your customer, and AML is anti money laundering. And those laws, at least the anti money laundering law, I think actually was like a result of 9/11, because the terrorists came and they were like laundering money and all this crazy stuff, and we had to have all these crazy. I mean, anytime there's a crisis, right? The government's never going to let that go to waste. They're going to find all these ways to like make sure people aren't uh, laundering money or trying to sidestep their power in any way. But that's neither here nor there. So most of the exchanges that you use, if not all, are going to make you go through some form of KYC to use their platform. Some of the exchanges, which maybe aren't based in the US, or like a DEX, or I'm sorry, DEX, which stands for decentralized exchange. Also, try not to use too many lingo terms and actually explain what I mean. So if I use a lingo, please tell me. DEXs typically will allow you to come in and permissionlessly use their swaps, their pools, do whatever. However, once you get to that on and off ramp stage where you like, let's just say I have a credit card or money like in a bank, and I want to actually get in and I want to on ramp. At that point, it's a third party service like Cado, like Transact, like Ramp, that they're going to go through some sort of KYC service that's collecting your information and making sure that they're basically they want to know where the money's coming from and keep everybody under a watchful eye. But you could, and I'm not, again, this is not investment advice, this is not legal advice, I'm not advising anybody do this. But if you happen to know somebody and you trust them enough, which isn't necessarily the point of crypto, and you're like, hey, you've got one Bitcoin you want to sell to me, I will buy it from you at X rate. And if you go and you check the price of, let's just say, Bitcoin versus USDC, like on an exchange, like let's say Bitstamp or Coinbase or whatever, you could again tell this person that this hypothetical person, and I would never do this, but you would say, oh, well, your Bitcoin is quoted at $29,000 on Bitstamp. If you sell it to me and I happen to have $29,000 cash, I would like to pay maybe $27,000 because in this hypothetical scenario that would never happen in my life or yours, that person could potentially evade taxes because they don't need to go through the exchange to do that. And I think that's part of the reason why we saw local Bitcoins kind of under a lot of heat. And again, I don't necessarily advise you do that. I think another option that was popular before was Bitcoin ATMs. And to be honest, I will admit I've never used a Bitcoin ATM. I don't know enough about it to know kind of how that works. I would find it very hard to believe that they don't have some kind of KYC method, especially if you're going to them and selling crypto for cash. I mean, and again, there might be limits to that. I also know that they take a huge spread where if you go in and you sell them Bitcoin, or even if you buy Bitcoin, like they're going to make you pay a pretty large premium to do that in person. Um, so yeah, everybody's best bet is just to go through the exchanges, in my opinion, and just deal with the KYC, AML, and again, talk to an accountant. I have no problem paying my fair share in taxes. It's whatever. I don't love doing KYC on every single platform out there because I think there's more nefarious purposes that people do KYC, or even it could just be they just lose your data or they like get hacked and now someone has my data that I don't want to. Aside, like it's not like I'm trying to just sidestep taxes. I think there's other reasons why I don't love doing KYC every 5 minutes, which is getting harder and harder to get around. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
All right.
Very well. Number 3 is, so I know stocks are different, but for crypto, are you able to trade 24/7 at all hours? You can trade.
Yeah. So for crypto, you can, and it's actually very interesting because for stocks, there's a market window. So I think opening bell for traditional equities is 9:30, and then it closes at 4 o'clock. So the market will have the most amount of volume trading in that period. Now there are derivatives, which is basically just a fancy word for like options and futures and things that they're not necessarily. So there's like spot, they call it, like spot purchasing or spot trading. That is and this is the same in crypto and in traditional equities like the stock market. Um, Whenever you purchase spot, you buy, you sell, whatever, that is, you're actually trading the underlying asset. So if I go in and I buy Bitcoin spot, I have that Bitcoin on an exchange. I can pull it off the exchange. I can take it. I can put it in cold storage. In the stock market, in theory, say you buy one share of Tesla, you own that share of Tesla, even though it's on an E-Trade or a Fidelity account. And I'm pretty sure in theory, you can like ask them to somehow redeem the certificate. I don't know how that works. I've never done that either. But that's spot. And then there are the derivatives markets, which is futures. And those are basically contracts where I can say to you, hey, I might have enough money in my account to sell you a Bitcoin future contract. That means you think that the future price of Bitcoin is going to be $30,000 1 month from now. And that's when the contract expires. And I sell it to you. And what that does is that gives you the right to purchase Bitcoin from me at $30,000. Now, I don't necessarily have to have I don't necessarily have to have a Bitcoin to sell you at that time. So there's no like spot asset underlying that contract, but I do need to have the collateral posted when I sell that contract, so that if it does come to the point where you would want to buy Bitcoin for $30,000, um, I need to basically buy it and sell it to you at that price, or have it at that price. And some of them work a little bit different. Like with options, there's covered calls versus calls. And the difference there is like you actually have the underlying asset handy versus not having it handy. But regardless, this again, I'm on a tangent here. Um, the crypto markets, they're global. So the U.S. stock market and equities market, it starts at 9:30 and ends at 4, but there is a little bit of like derivatives trading that goes on. The volumes is much lower during those periods. Crypto, because it's global and there's not really like a market. There's just sessions. So there's the U.S. session where everybody in the U.S. will trade it. Then there's, I don't even know what would be. I mean, then there's Asia. So there might be a little bit of a lull between like our evening and then no, I mean not even really, because there's the West Coast. So crypto markets are open nonstop. Excuse me, and it's actually pretty nice. It's nice and it's not nice in ways, because the volatility can get a little bit wild on weekends, like when the traditional markets are closed. So it has its pros and cons. The nice thing is there's usually always enough liquidity and volume, even on like newer tokens, that on a Sunday evening when you wouldn't be able to really trade anything in the traditional stock market, I can go in and there's pretty good liquidity on KuCoin for like some shitcoin that I want to trade. So that's one of the benefits. One of the negatives is you end up becoming a degen with like bags under your eyes and you can never sleep, and you're like trading like the Asian session instead of the US session, or trading Europe session, and like it's just wild. It's a wild concept. But yes, you can trade crypto 24/7. You don't need any special permissions or anything like that. It's just it's always open. It's like a 7-Eleven. And I'm having my second ranch water. The show is not sponsored by ranch water, by the way.
All right. My next question is, apart from payments, what other functions do crypto have?
Oh, this is a good question. So everybody that asks me, all the normies that ask me about crypto, and I try not to get like too deep into it. So this is really like the surface level explanation that I'll give everyone. And it's going to sound kind of, it might sound stupid, because the use case for Bitcoin, for the longest time, there was this argument over whether it was something that could facilitate payments. And like maybe if there was low volume, it could be. And there are certain people that forked Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin, and then there's Bitcoin Cash, and then there's Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, which were these forks of the original Bitcoin, where because of some of the limitations of Bitcoin, like BTC, they were like, hey, this can't be used as really like a payment system. Like nobody's going to go and buy coffee and be like, here, let me send you Bitcoin, because it takes however long to process, and the fees are just, it's, I think something, I think Visa, like Visa, like credit cards and stuff, I think around the holidays, they process like 24,000 transactions a second or something like insane. Like it's an insane number. I might be making that up, but I might not be. Like there's a crazy stat out there, and the Bitcoin network could never keep up with that. It just takes too long, and it has more security, and because it's decentralized and anybody out there can basically like mine a block. It just can't do that kind of volume. So the cash thing and like the payments thing for Bitcoin specifically isn't even really necessarily a use case. However, and this is what I tell people who, they're normies and they like ask me what I do. Usually I'm like, do computers. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they start digging. And then like, finally I have to tell, it's like such a dreadful conversation, honestly. It's either like someone's into it and I'm excited to talk to them, or they have no idea. And then I got to explain like all this ridiculous stuff to them. But for what I say to them is, for Bitcoin specifically, it's very much worth looking into as an investment, because it is a way for any human on earth to, without permission, retain value, um, and not have any sort of physical liability that they might lose that value. So what do I mean by that? If you remember your seed phrase for a cold storage wallet, meaning you're not on any, you're not holding your Bitcoin in any exchange, um, you remember your seed phrase off the top of your head, you wrote a poem or whatever, you could be thrown in jail, arrested, beaten, near death, sent to a different country, sent to Guantanamo Bay, sent to Rikers, get your arm ripped off by a shark, anything. But as long as you remember your seed phrase, you can always come back. And as long as the Bitcoin network's still running, which I think as long as like we don't have like the nuclear holocaust, we're going to be good with that. Um, you can always re-access your value. Now, the whole store of value, I think sometimes people take that out of context because they say, "Oh, Bitcoin, like great store of value, lost 50% of its value in the last, 3 months." And yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. Maybe in that way it's not a great like store of value, because it's not just this solid asset. It's not like gold where I can buy a gold bar and I know it's going to be worth whatever. It's only going to go up 2% and then down 2% in the next 10 years, and it's stored its value, I guess. Great. But it is a store of value, unlike gold, because and again, the physical liability part is, if I was a digital nomad or if I needed to move across the world to a different country, it's very, very hard for me to do that with a truckload of gold bricks. But the value equivalent of that in Bitcoin, it's very, very easy for me to do it. In fact, I don't need anything. All I need to do is remember my seed phrase, right? So you get stopped at the border, you could get arrested, you could, whatever happens, it's a unique asset in that you can retain your value no matter what. Nobody can stop you from transacting with it, unless they physically retain you or kill you. And even at that point, like once you're free, or I mean, if you die, you die. But if you're free at some point, you can go back and get that value. You can't do that with real estate because it can get confiscated or whatever. You can't do that with cash. It's there's too much of a physical liability. I mean, anybody can steal cash. Uh, you can't do it with gold bars because again, anybody can come in and confiscate or steal it. I mean, you could bury it in your backyard, but then it's so inconvenient to move around. Um, can't do it with any money in the bank, which is they're digital dollars too, but that's the first thing to get frozen if you're if they suspect that you're committing a crime or doing something that's um, potentially even politically against the regime's wishes. Um, so really all of those things, all of those tools that people use to like retain value or store value, um, whether it's a currency, or a commodity, or a precious metal or whatever, all of those things can be censored or taken from you through one way or another, or they are so impossible to stash in a way that it can't be taken from you, that it would be impossible for you to use anyway. And that's like the gold bar example, or if you, like buried a treasure chest in the forest under the tree, like what, you can't spend that, right? And you definitely can't move to a different country and expect to retain that value. So that, in my view, that is like the native use case of cryptocurrency. Is for the first time ever, people can retain value without any physical liabilities. um, it's immutable, it's uncensorable by any government in the world, and I can access it without really any tools other than I just need internet access, and I can borrow a friend's computer. And as long as I have my seed phrase, I can prove to people that I actually still have that value. Unlike the treasure chest under the tree, if I move to, let's say, Singapore, and my treasure chest is buried in Pittsburgh, like, how can I prove to anybody that I have that treasure? I can't. But with Bitcoin, I can sign a transaction and send a little bit, or I can do whatever, and it's like, here it is, it's with me, even though it's not with me. So um, that's definitely, in my opinion, a very powerful use case, even beyond payments. Um, and then there are other use cases that we can dive into. A lot of them are like very technical. A lot of them are very like data, like surrounding data security. Um, I mean, there's a bunch out there, but in my opinion, like that's the one that really matters. That's the one that is the true, like, holy shit, this is a revolutionary thing that people, most people that get into crypto are just speculating on the value, and they don't like take a step back and think of that. And so, and people also don't like respect the orange coin. Like, you're a young kid, you don't respect the orange coin. And so, Joseph Casa intern, one of the things he said to me when Luna crashed was, and I talked about this publicly. I'm on record of saying this. I should ask Finn, the guy who records all the Twitter Spaces, for the one specific one, because people were telling me, they're like, no, 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 like Luna and Osmosis, like these are what we really want to put our money in, because Bitcoin's already topped out and it's boomer coin and blah blah blah. And it's like, dude, these altcoins are like volatile, and when the markets crash and you get killed, it's going to be brutal for Bitcoin, but it's going to be way, way, way worse for the alts, way worse. And so you want to always have exposure to Bitcoin, whether the markets are going up or the markets are going down. You want to always have that, because Bitcoin's going to lead the charge on the way down, or as we saw this time, like a lot of alts got killed and then Bitcoin kind of fell later. But Bitcoin goes down 50%. Alts go down, as we saw in Luna's case, like 99%. So you always want to respect the orange coin. You always want to have some exposure to that. And then on the alternative side, whenever the markets come back up, Bitcoin's going to lead the charge on the way back up. At least that's the way we've seen it for the past three cycles. I would hesitate to say four, because I don't know how many alts were around in whatever 2011. But whenever we see the next bull run, and whatever, is it 2023 or whatever, or 2025, I don't know, whatever year, it will be Bitcoin that will run to 100,000 and make headlines, and then all of a sudden, like, everybody will be back in, and then the alts will kind of follow. At least that's the way that I see it, and the way that it's happened. Pete will tell me that you shouldn't predict the future based on what's happened in the past, but I mean, I don't know. That's just, the cycles have been so like spot on that it's hard for me to, like, until that it's not like that anymore. I'm just going to assume that it's just going to repeat itself. Um, so that's the main use case, I think, for Bitcoin, and Ethereum is very much like that as well. It has all of those properties, but Ethereum, it actually brings a little bit more to the table, because you introduce smart contracts and the ability to have like composability on top of it, whereas Bitcoin is really like digital gold at this point, because it has more name recognition. And at the end of the day, a currency or a commodity or anything that has value, it only has that value based on people's recognition of it, and people like a shared sort of agreed upon value. And Bitcoin has more recognition than anything else as far as cryptocurrencies go. So that was a long-winded answer. How long are we into the show already? 29 minutes.
Yep.
Wow, this is going great.
All right, so I have a question based off of your last answer.
Okay.
I heard you talking about this, and this is actually a question I had: is what is a fork?
So whenever you sit down at the dinner table, you need something to put the food in your mouth.
Not that fork.
Oh, what are you talking
A
about?
crypto fork.
Oh, a crypto fork.
Yes.
So there's forks that they actually paint. Like there's a Bitcoin fork, and they paint it orange, and you like it's just designed like a crypto. You can buy them probably on Amazon. We have a link for 15% off. Put in Bytes 15, you'll get 15% off your Bitcoin fork. No, okay. So the most famous example of a fork. Well, maybe not the most famous example, but one of the most famous examples, the one I was just talking about, which was Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. So what happens when there's a cryptocurrency? You have this history of blocks. Excuse me. Edit out some of these ranch water burps, or not. So you have this history of blocks, which is basically like the ledger, which shows all of the accounts and their transactions and the transactions that took place on that block. And then we know kind of like where the money's moving and all this stuff. With a fork, what happens is the network has decided through one way or another that there needs to be a change to like the underlying software that's processing the transactions. And I'm like simplifying this.
That's what I need.
Yeah.
Simplified.
So in any network, there's like with Luna, there's validators, right? So the validators agree on the software that is required in order to continue processing transactions for everyone. In Bitcoin, it's I don't even know if there's a name for it. It might just be called like Bitcoin, where all of the miners are running the transactions using the software. The most famous example of a fork happened in, I think it was like 2017 maybe, where Bitcoin, there was a huge rift in the Bitcoin community because some people think that Bitcoin should be the store of value, kind of like what I just talked about, and others think that it should be used more as like a cash, like it can be used for transactions. And the block size right now, meaning every block in Bitcoin is like I don't know 6 seconds or six transaction or 10 seconds, six transactions per second. The Bitcoin maxes are like ready to kill me right now. Well, actually, let me look it up. What is the Bitcoin block size? Fill the airwaves, Steph.
Really don't know what to say. I'm trying to learn here, so I'm asking the questions.
Okay, so Bitcoin has a block time of 10 minutes, which is very slow. And it has a block size of 1 megabyte, which I guess there's not a fixed amount of transactions, but it's not a lot. 1 megabyte is pretty small.
Yeah.
So every 10 minutes, a new block is printed or added to the chain, and it goes on top of the entire chain that has all the previous blocks on it. And you can go back and you can query the whole blockchain and see every transaction that's ever happened. What happened with Bitcoin Cash is they were like, hey, we should have a block size of 32 megabytes, which would have 32 times more throughput than Bitcoin. And it would allow for more transactions every 10 minutes when a new block is mined. And then Bitcoin Satoshi's vision removed the block size limit altogether, according to the awesome website and internet sleuthing work of Wikipedia. So what happened is a certain amount of miners agreed to change the block size to 32 megabytes, which allows for more throughput of transactions. And a certain other set of miners were like, no, we're not changing this. We want 1 megabyte. We like the way it is. And the miners begin to pick up the miners basically changed the software, and it's like if your computer needed to update, like needed a software update, and I just chose to like continue running on like an old version of Mac, and in another universe, I decided to update my computer and keep like, not keep running, but like, split. It's a split. So now the chains fork. So if you think the chain is like one sort of like monolithic kind of tower that goes up, a fork is half of the miners or whatever percentage of the miners take the chain in one direction using one software update, and the rest of them just kept going straight up the tower. So now you've got a fork, like a fork in the road. Okay.
Okay.
So that's what a fork is. So whenever somebody says we're going to hard fork the network, usually that means there's some disagreement or something needs to change that they don't think everyone will agree with. And so, you're going to change the name, or you're going to, it's going to be like 2.0 and 1.0 will exist or whatever. So that's what happens. Like both Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, if you trace the blocks back far enough, share that same trunk if it was a tree. But eventually they split off. And actually, the people that owned Bitcoin before the fork, now after the fork, had Bitcoin Cash as well. So if you owned one Bitcoin, and back then it was like, I don't know, like let's say $10,000, you were given a Bitcoin Cash at equal value, at parity. Excuse me. And I think Bitcoin Cash ended up being worth like $4,000 to $6,000. So it was like free money for people. Eventually, it kind of fizzled out. I think it's like probably, I don't know. I have no idea. It might be 2 digits right now, but does that answer your question?
Yes. So a question to go with that also is how you said when it forked, what one side went to like 1 megabyte and then the other side went to 32. What happens to any of like new miners? Do they get to pick which like pretty much road they'd want to go down, or is it like they have to go with the updated ones? Now every new miner has to stick with 32, or could they decide go with 32 megabytes or go with one?
No, you could decide. You can decide. I mean, you could in theory do both if you had enough like, I guess, hash power, mining power. Um, and there was people that like they basically had to pick which one they wanted to continue working on, and it was based off of a lot of a lot of like rhetoric around the philosophy of Bitcoin. Not so much a technical thing. It wasn't like it's not a technical hurdle. It's a, do you think that there should be more transactions per block in Bitcoin, or do you like the way it is? And the community split, and had all of the miners been like, all right, we actually like the bigger block size. Eventually, in an alternate universe, would have seen Bitcoin Cash, or I think it's BCH. We would have seen that become like the leader, and Bitcoin would be like this, relic of history. But excuse me, but that's not how it happened. So
Okay. Sec, let me get my questions pulled back up. Another question I had is I always hear Pete talking about it, but I really never fully understood it. So, like, what is a smart contract and like what's some of its like applications?
okay, so smart contract. So we talked a lot about Bitcoin on the show, which is I think very appropriate for Crypto 101. Um, Introductions to smart contract I think is also very appropriate for Crypto 101. And looking deeper into how they work would probably be like a Crypto 201 course, but we can talk at the surface level of kind of what they are. Um, with Bitcoin, you can really only, because of, again, block size limits and just the way that it was designed, you can really only send and receive funds. You can send it to a wallet. You can send it to a centralized exchange, and like they can use it as collateral for maybe more complex things. But there's really very few, if any, parameters that you can set on Bitcoin transactions that allow you to um, have any flexibility other than just like person A sends X amount of Bitcoin to person B. That's the limit. So with smart contracts, these were introduced with Ethereum, and what they allow you to do is you can now basically create a new address or a new account that allows you to set parameters or set boundaries, or set rules to the way that your money moves. And so I can build a smart contract on Ethereum, and I can say, hey, I want Steph to send his Ethereum to my smart contract, and for every month that he is staked to my smart contract, I want to issue him some. I'm going to issue him Evan token. I just invented a token. It's going to go to the moon. So I'm going to issue you Evan token, and every month that you're staked to this smart contract, you get Evan token from me sent back to your wallet. And then at any moment you can unstake. And I never have access to your funds. I just built this contract that basically allows me to like set rules and stuff. Now I could make it so that, at a certain point, if you're staked for long enough, I do get access to your funds. But on a broader level, what smart contracts allow you to do is set up rules of the way that you move money. You can set time boundaries. You can set limits. You can set. You could do like a bunch of stuff with it. Basically, one of the biggest use cases ever was when ICOs came out, and ICOs stands for initial coin offering. So, just to quickly kind of cover this rabbit hole and this little bit of history, whenever a company goes public, like a company goes public, like a Facebook, that's called an IPO, initial public offering. And so you're taking the equity in this business, and you're securitizing it, meaning you're creating a security out of it, and you're putting it on the stock exchange for people to now invest in your company. With ICOs, initial coin offering, you basically were skipping like all of the hard work it takes to get to IPO level for a business, and now any company or any individual or groups or anons or whoever that had a decent white paper and a landing page would say, "Hey, we're gonna create the next token. It's going to be called Evan token," to use that example again. And I have a smart contract on my website that says, you give me Ethereum, and for every one Ethereum you give me, you're buying into my ICO. I'm going to issue you 100 Evan tokens. And it's a very simple smart contract. You're giving me the money, and it automatically issues you back a different token, with the ERC20 standard, which is like basically means you could send me Ethereum from an Ethereum wallet, and I can send you Evan tokens back to your same exact address, your Ethereum wallet, and it all works out hunky dory. Which wouldn't work out well if you sent me Bitcoin and I tried to send you Ethereum, because Bitcoin addresses and Ethereum addresses are run on a different standard. So does that explain kind of what smart contracts are?
Yes.
Pete could definitely get a lot more in the weeds on that, because Pete actually programs smart contracts, and I would say they've become much more robust in the past even just the past couple years, where you can definitely do a lot more with them, and you can get a lot more granular. Like the ICO example is a very, very simple, very high level. You send me one token, and the contract automatically sends you back. You send me token X, contract sends you back token Y. Nowadays, with the introduction of like games and DeFi and shit like that, these smart contracts can become very, very complex, and they can get very granular in like, you send me X NFT, and it has X like characteristic or variable attached to it, then the contract will perform Y action, maybe even on behalf of another individual that's interacting with the contract at the same time. So they can become very, very complex, and that's just part of the industry kind of evolving, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. We are down to my last question I have now.
All right.
This is one thing I never understood how they got this, but how is the price of gas fees calculated? Because I always know every time I make a transaction, something's taken out, and I just want to know why. Why is it being taken out? Like, where's that coming from, the price wise?
So gas fees vary depending on which network you're in. The term gas is very specific to Ethereum. And the way that Ethereum is determined is um, basically the miners on Ethereum are there's a like a supply and demand curve. And so if there's more demand, then gas fees go up because miners are willing to process your transaction faster if you're willing to pay more Ethereum. And there's multiple reasons why people would pay more gas in order to make their transaction go through first. The first of which, just as like a retail normie, is you're tired of waiting around for your transaction to go through. So you're like, what the hell? Where's my money? Um, there's also something called miner extracted value, which is more of like a crypto like 501 course type thing. Um, but that is like every transaction before it gets posted, it sits in something called the mempool, which means that it hasn't gone through yet, but the miners can basically see it and they can choose to pick it up and add it to the block. Um, so the more gas that you pay basically gives you priority in the queue over when your transaction gets processed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if there's a ton of transactions coming in, the gas fees will rise, just like gasoline, right? If there's a supply, if there's a bottleneck on supply, the price of gas in the real world will literally go up. And I mean, that's the analog. That's the reason they call it gas, is because it's a literal analog in the real world to the price of gas and the price of gas on Ethereum. If all of a sudden there's a supply glut and nobody's driving cars, then the price of gas goes to $1.50 on the road, and the price of gas goes to maybe a couple cents on Ethereum. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Makes sense.
Have you learned anything today?
I have.
What's the number one thing you think you've learned today, young Steph? Have you learned to turn the camera on?
I should not try to avoid the taxes for crypto. That was number one.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway. That's a good takeaway. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody for rocking and rolling with us tonight here on Thursday. This is Panterra's Bagel Shop. We do this every Thursday at 4:30. If you want to join, usually we are live. This one was pre-recorded because I am out of town, but usually we take live questions on the YouTube comments. So we appreciate you rolling with us. Steph learned a lot. Of course, we're all about not avoiding taxes here. And we would never do anything like that. So everybody out there, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, stay legal, stay within the boundaries of the regime and the oppressive regime that you may or may not live in. Whether it's a raisin bagel, a poppy seed bagel, a chocolate covered bagel, a lox bagel, whatever kind of cream cheese is on it, you can always enjoy bagels here on Panterra's Bagel Shop Thursday night at 4:30. And that's it. Cheers, guys.
See you.